Has your mental health suffered as a result of thinking that you need to find the perfect way to say something or to be doing absolutely everything, and you just end up so overburdened that your mind and your emotions just get lost in the turmoil of this perfectionism that you can't ever seem to attain? It's this never-ending cycle of things that just keep getting added to your to-do list in life, and life is more like you're barely treading water. If that's the case, then this interview with Jen Anderson, the professional imperfectionist, is one for you to hear. She has some great grounded wisdom that will help you start to move forwards from that place of feeling stuck. Allow your heart to listen.
I'm gonna add in that we have the imperfect internet today, and so we're both trying to adjust ourselves to the time lag of pauses and things that are happening on our screens and our sound, which makes this a wonderfully imperfect conversation. So I'm very grateful today to have the guest of Jen Anderson. She is the professional imperfectionist who is behind the Accomplice app, a to-do app for imperfect humans. And for me, she really aligned with how it is that we are actually stable in the messiness. It's in the mess that we discover our stability, we learn how to be stable. And so she and her work really felt aligned to share as part of this teaching. So she really helps people who may have a perfectionist issue, and I, hands up, have had that problem in my life too, and how that leads us to overwhelm. And so she is bringing us a beautiful, simple way in which we can move forwards from that. Her background is a native New Yorker. She was a .com veteran, and she loves to work and knit with mixed media and art in Los Angeles, now in California. And before I let Jen jump straight in and tell us a little bit more about her journey.
Okay. I'm a perfectionist myself, is the thing, a recovering perfectionist. And the way I came to it was I get migraines a lot, and pretty frequently. Sometimes it has been more than 15 days a month on occasion. Yeah, which is bad. It's chronic. And part of that is the mind-body issues. Is that if you're a perfectionist, if you have trauma that your brain is trying to suppress, then your brain will try to distract you by causing pain. And yeah, my brain does a great job of that. So I was doing some mind-body health work, and perfectionism was definitely one of the problems. And what I actually did was I started making collages, because I'm no good at it, and I don't care that I'm no good at it. That's the important thing. I am a terrible guitar player. Around the same time, I bought myself a ukulele, and no, I just can't do it. My husband can play anything by ear. I know too many professional musicians to be okay with me not being able to play guitar or ukulele. So that's not going to help me. I mean, if I wanted to do it, yes, I could work on it, but it's not going to help my mental health. So I started making collages and just ripping stuff out of magazines and scotch taping them. Not even gluing them, just taping them to a paper. And cooking magazines are great for this, working out your anger, because there's all these pictures of knives and fire. And so I started doing those. And my first one I showed my husband, he said, "Oh, that's great. We should put it on the refrigerator." And I told him, no, the whole point is that it's no good. And I kept doing it, and I've improved. And it's just a way for me to create something, but also to, remind myself that I've made something more beautiful than was there than a blank piece of paper. And I'm creating beauty in the world, but I don't have to share it with anybody. I'm not selling it. And that's the thing. I'm also a writer. On top of everything else, I do blogging for a plus-size clothing company. And that's the kind of thing where, I've done it every week for a decade for the same company. And it is very tempting to go over things and to fix them. and to fiddle with them. There is not an author in the world who thinks their book is actually as good as it could be. We would work on our stuff for all eternity if we could. And ultimately, I got the advice that at the things that you're good at, most people can't tell the difference between your A+ work and your B+ work. So I stopped, at least with this client, I just stopped obsessing quite so much, which helped tremendously, realizing that, yeah, it's okay, that I am actually doing a good job. I don't have to be perpetually waiting for her to call and say, yeah, no, this one was no good. I need you to start over or fix it or something. No, it's perfectly adequate. I know what they need, and I'm delivering it. And okay, maybe it's not as good as I could make it, but it doesn't have to be as good as I could make it.
Beautiful. And it brings a question for me around when you have that feeling of it's done and it's as good as you could make it at that time, right? Is there ever that feeling like when things change in the world and we get more awareness of how you would do it if you redid it again in the future?
Absolutely. I look at blog posts that I wrote 10 years ago and wonder who wrote this. If I weren't so familiar with the company and my byline weren't there, I would think someone else had written it because I've learned so much more. And another example, my latest creative project, I'm caning a chair. I have this wooden chair that has been in my family for over 50 years. And finally the reed seat broke. Finally it gave out. So I ordered some reed and a kit and instructions, and I've watched videos, and I'm putting it together and thinking, okay, it does not have to look as good as the guy in the video. I'm not a professional. I'm not selling it. It just has to be a seat. It doesn't have to last for 50 years. It's a seat. And I've gotten to the end twice so far now and realized that one, my chair needs more reed than I actually bought. It's a larger seat than expected. And also, I need to go back and do a slightly better job, which is fine. It's okay. There is, on the one hand, we have the professional way of doing it. And on the other hand, we have, that's not a chair. That's not a seat that's going to support weight. And so I can do that a bit better.
I hear that as there's two pieces, right? There's the perfectionist that pursues something that can never be attained because it's always changing and evolving. And therefore it was perfect yesterday, and then today with a new perspective, new fresh eyes, it needs to be rewritten again. And that's the writing that you see in that artist is like the self-creative force that sees that there's this constant evolution of how something could be in this moment and then in the next new moment. But then there's also there is a perfection of form and function that sometimes have to meet, that we may need to work on our skill development to execute something so that it meets function and form.
Exactly. It's a matter of good enough. And it's not, good enough is fine, but it's not actually good enough. And with a lot of creative work, we tend to fiddle with it and hold it back. We're afraid it's not ready. And because even the greatest of writers struggles with this, we need outside opinions. We need a writing group, other authors looking at our stuff. We need some sort of feedback, a coach, what have you, just to tell you, you're okay. This is getting there. Or here, all right, it's not there yet, but here is where here's where it needs work. Instead of you telling yourself that it's garbage and you have to keep working. And so sometimes we need this outside perspective.
Right. And it sounds, there's also what I'm hearing underneath all of this is because we're talking about it being creative work, being the piece that we get stuck in perfection. And you talked about how you came to this through mental health. And I'm curious as to, do you see that creative force coming through that seeks that, that you might seek perfection in the writing, in the art, in the music playing, as that perfection of the self-identity that you're seeking, this perfect Jen?
Maybe. Because Perfection doesn't exist. Excellence exists. So the ideal me I'm much closer to the ideal me than I used to be. For therapist is the charm. I've been through a lot of processing, and I'm much more content with life and more at peace. So that's fantastic. And part of it is age, and part of it is therapy, and lots of doing the hard work. But I think with any sort of project, we feel like if it's not perfect, we're not good enough. We have this all or nothing thinking. And it can just seep into everything. If your kitchen's a little messy, you might feel like absolute garbage. But, it's not disgusting, it's not full of bugs, but you just feel like a failure because your kitchen isn't Pinterest ready. And no one's kitchen really is. And so it's the way that we hold ourselves back a lot from thinking that we're okay and beating ourselves up. One thing that really helped me years back was going to yoga classes, because for the longest time, actually my entire practice in groups, I was the largest person in the class, and that's fine. Because I'd done it for so long, after a few years, I was one of the more flexible people in the class, even though I was the biggest. But I would look at other people and think, oh, they're so much thinner than I am, but oh wait, that lady's shoulder is a lot tighter than mine. So I can move my arm much farther into this pose than she can. And oh yeah, so we're all different. We all have different strengths and weaknesses or room for improvement, and that's okay. With yoga, it's a wonderful meditation practice for me, because it really I have to focus my attention on not falling over. And, I've had bad knees since an accident when I was a kid, and my ankles aren't that great. So having to focus on not falling over is good for calming my mind. But also, as long as I'm not falling over, it's good enough.
It's beautiful, yeah. And yoga is, it's very easy to come into the practice thinking it's all about perfect poses and perfect looks. And, I hurt my shoulder 2 months ago, and I'm there teaching classes, and I'm like, this is my one arm. And there's the other arm. And so I'm teaching in a very imperfect way. And actually, it's how I first began teaching 25 years ago. The first thing I did as soon as I qualified, was fall down some stairs and sprain my ankle. And then a week after my ankle had recovered, so I was hopping around, teaching people on one foot. And then once that got better, I dislocated my shoulder. And so I spent the first 3 months of teaching injured, not the perfect look for a teacher of movement practices, right? And so I love very much going in and just honoring my body and what it can do and what it wants in that time. And that is that ability to tune out what's happening in the rest of the room and really tune into, what do I need? What is this that I can serve my body and look after it? And it's not going to be perfect. There's always going to be some niggle in the body, right? That's kind of the nature of a moving, living being. Is that there's something going on, and I think it's beautiful when we can have those places where we can go and tune in and let go of that perfection. But we have to stop looking outside and comparing ourselves to everyone else. But sometimes, as you say, looking at everyone else and going, oh, their pose looks like that, and that pose looks like that, and just allowing everyone to have their own shape and their own expression is that reminder that we're all different and we're all having our own struggles.
Exactly. It's comparison is the thief of joy, but it can also be a comfort sometimes. If we come into it as not I'm garbage or they're garbage, so I'm okay. It's, oh, we're all okay. We often talk about talking to yourself the way that you would talk to a friend, because there is no way, the way that we talk to ourselves, I call perfectionism a bully in your brain. And that bully talks to you in a way that you would never talk to any other human being. Even your worst enemy, you wouldn't talk that way to them. And so sometimes looking out and doing a little comparison can help you realize that and stop.
Yes, and I think you've brought up a really important point around the bully in the brain. That perfectionist is harsh. They're a really mean inner critic. They are a bully, and I'd be curious as to how do you catch yourself in those inner dialogues to talk to yourself as a friend rather than hear the other version. And I seem to remember, I've just forgotten the name of your perfectionist had a name. I remember reading that blog post on your website.
Oh, yes. Salieri.
Thank you.
And because, the Salieri in the movie, Amadeus, and in the play, he's a frenemy. He is just evil and difficult. In reality, Salieri was quite encouraging. But, and I'm forgetting the name of Mozart's other mentor, but I think it's Haydn, who once Mozart met Haydn, then he became a genius. But, Salieri was actually helping him. He was not being all mean. So it's trying to reframe my inner critic that is trying to do better. But also, one thing it was difficult for me to learn to stand up for myself. So one thing I did is, every time I walked into the kitchen, I would hear my mother or my Aunt B nagging me about how messy the kitchen was. And, 1980s, 1990s, Mom probably would have been too polite to say something. Now, Mom? Of course not. Now she's gotten much more laid back long after it could do me any good. But, so it's this imaginary monster in my head. But it's my mom. It's my Aunt B. It's someone close to me. And we also think, oh no, I know me. I am the expert in me. So obviously all my criticisms are valid. What I did was I changed that voice to someone who I didn't like. I don't like them. They don't like me. And I don't care. It's fine. And not everyone loves each other. And that made it so much easier for me to say, mentally, get out of my kitchen. That your opinion is not wanted. So, go away, Salieri. I want real Salieri. I want someone encouraging. And it's so some of it is yelling. And it was a huge breakthrough for me, actually, when I woke up out of a dream talking. I was actually saying out loud, somebody help me. And usually in dreams, I was not able to call out for help or to stand up for myself. So I screamed it in the dream. And out loud, it was just I spoke it a little bit and I woke myself up. And it felt great. Just being able to stand up for myself finally. And to stand up to Salieri and stand up to the dream monsters and what have you. It's a big step. It's a huge breakthrough, and
It is.
we get through baby steps. Maybe it's just telling the bully to shush. Or, you give them a name of someone you don't like. You call them Stinky. Or something like that. And something that helps you kind of change your perspective of that inner critic. Because your inner critic can also be your inner coach. When you're doing something creative or anything. Any work project, any whatever. Your inner coach can help you to get it right, to not make mistakes, to find ways that it could improve, that you could do it better next time. It's your inner critic who frames all those things as you're garbage. So if we talk back to that person, then we can kind of change the way they talk to us too.
What I was reflecting on from what you'd shared was the point about the chair, the inner coach helping you with the chair, right? So, seeing, that's not going to work. We can't sit on that. That's not functional, right? Whereas the inner critic isn't needed at that time, but the inner critic could go off on one, right? But, you never get anything right. You never can do blah, 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 right? So that's the kind of, that's what you're distinguishing the two was making me think about, was how it can be useful to help us move through something, but also noticing the extra inner critic going on when you're doing such a project. You're like, that's not relevant, that's not necessary.
Absolutely. Because I could have very easily decided, okay, I can't do this. I'm just going to have to pay someone to do it. And no, what I actually need to do is to pay a little money to just get more materials. But looking at it and looking at it at the side, I have it in my living room up on a chair. up on a box so I can just sit in a chair and work on it. And looking at it from different angles, I'm like, oh no, I didn't do a good job in that part. It starts out fine, and I was looking at it going, okay, maybe I overdid it with squishing them over to the corner to make sure it's squared. So let me go through and spread them out a little bit. And no, that's not doing it, because it's not quite right. That was not the way to fix it. And yeah, it turns out it looks like unweaving it and starting over is going to be the way to do it, and that's okay. It's been a learning session and a learning experience, and the reed it's supposed to last for decades, so I think it can survive me weaving and unweaving a couple of times.
And that's such a beautiful example, I think, of the inner critic that drives that perfectionism. And also, you've mentioned where the inner critic might come from, whether it comes from the perception of what your parents have, what a parent has said, or what teachers have said when we're a kid, or the aunts, whoever it is, like society, or whether or not, those have been words that have been said to us that we've interpreted that way. It's both. It's both what's said, but also our interpretation and how we carry that forwards inside ourselves as a dialogue.
Just made it so that I couldn't really learn, and it stressed me out. And so now they use green pens, and it's a lot easier to swallow. And it's just, your teachers are trying to teach you things, but you can get caught up in worrying and anxiety that you're going to get in trouble.
And I can really relate. It's funny, I have a very different approach with that as a lawyer. When I was training as a lawyer, one of the ways that you learn is, and it's actually called redline. So when you're negotiating contracts, you redline the other person's contract with the changes that you want. And then as you go through, you accept the changes that you agree, and you redline to show the changes that you don't. And so it's not only used as a negotiation tool, but obviously we use it in teaching as someone else's training. They get red line of what they've drafted, of why did you write that? This is why we'd use it. This court case might say this, this would be the interpretation. And I loved redline because I felt like I was learning. Every time I saw red, it was like, oh, there's something for me to learn, something that I'm going to, understand. I'm being taught something. And when I didn't get redline, I'd be like, oh, I've done it all? Almost like, oh, it's done, I've completed that, learning? Oh, that's a bit sad. Kind of miss. Exactly, and I think that was really helpful, but it's interesting, I did that with law, but I didn't do that, with dancing, I couldn't do that. With dancing and not being, perfect in dance, that was stressful. And so it's interesting, I can see the two, but not with the marker pen, but with the body. With you're not in the right position, you're not doing that. And like we were saying earlier on with yoga, that's not about the perfect pose. It's about just really honouring you in that moment. But obviously learning dance for theatre is, everyone has to look the same, right? You all have to learn how to strike that pose. Otherwise, the corps de ballet aren't going to look the same, and it ruins the effect if you're twisting your foot the wrong way.
Yes, dance is very stressful that way. And it could just be maybe you're too tall, you're too short. There's just so many reasons that you could not make the cut in dancing. And it's tough. It is a very competitive world. And so, but I get it, because it's you, if you're working at that level. I like to talk about different reality shows, like on the Bake Off. On the British Bake Off. They are really mean sometimes, but they have these really good bakers, and they're trying to find something that they can use to make a decision on who's going home. Then you have shows, there's one, it's on Netflix called Nailed It, where it's people who cannot bake show up and they bake something and they decorate it and do a terrible job. And Jacques Torres is one of the judges, and he is so considerate. This is Mr. Chocolate. This is Jacques freaking Torres. And anything, you put something horrible in front of him and he will find something nice to say about it. And that's when you want mental health. If you want Paul Hollywood when you're seeking perfection and absolute excellence, when you're seeking good enough and mental health, you want Jacques Torres.
And that's a really beautiful distinction also, right? Is we're we were growing up chasing the Hollywood, the perfection, right? And there is still potentially that for young people especially, but for any of us to fall into with AI and perfect imagery and the perfect whatever. And that can be very confusing, and that really does derail mental health. And, my mental health was terrible when I did dance, ironically, because of that perfectionism that I was surrounded by. And so we can see that when it's a learning experience, like I was sharing with Laura, like you're doing with the chair, when it's learning, that inner coach is leading the way, and we can have good balanced mental health because we're building our sense of self and valuing ourselves. But yet when we let it be the inner critic and seeking that perfectionism, the mental health starts to be an issue. And it brings me to be curious as to how your app is designed to help people, I guess, with some of those components of, and I also have one other topic I want to catch before we finish up today, but I just wanted to ask about your app and how that helps people break their perfectionism.
Well, it's a to-do app, and I designed it because I was looking for the perfect to-do app for me. And the thing is that as a freelancer, my schedule is flexible, so I wanted to be able to get a good view of what I actually had on my plate to see what else I could put on my plate. And there were things that I wanted to do every day, but if I did them 4 days out of 5, 3 days, that's still good. And with an app, every other app, if you put something in as, something you want to do every day, if you don't do it yesterday, it's going to show up as overdue today in red. And I don't need that. I don't need an app to tell me I didn't do it. I'm already on top of beating myself up for not getting enough done. I know this. Back off, app. And doing it on paper meant having to write it all out. Write every single day. I'd have to write out, go on LinkedIn or meditate or what have you. So I designed an app that can do that. And it's more realistic. It's not tasks in Accomplice are not just done or not done. They can also be, let's see, what else? Skipped is my favorite, because sometimes you think, I'm not going to do that. And sometimes it's something that I'm not going to do at all. And sometimes it's a daily task that I'm not going to do that today. And that's okay. And you can, the app actually automatically generates a to-do list for you. So you can just change the due date, and punt it down the road. And nothing is ever overdue. There's no overdue status. You can mark something underway, because some things take more than one day, but you started on it and you don't want it looking on your app like you've done nothing. It's something that, because things that are not finished can kind of nag in our brains and hang in there. And if you put it in the app, and the app is reflecting reality, it just seems more normalized. And delegated is another status. And then you can look at the completed list or the delegated list to see, everything that you have put finished or delegated and you need to follow up with somebody. And it's just normalizing the fact that you can't get everything done. For a lot of us, we're just trying to do too much. And it's great to be trying to do more than we actually could, but when we feel bad that we can't, that's the problem. That's when we start affecting our own mental health and we start bullying ourselves. So with the app, our to-do lists are with us all day. So to have something with you all day to help you mark off everything that you need to do, and it's doing it in a gentle way and it's not nagging you, it just normalizes this and helps you to understand yourself and that you are trying to do too much, and it's okay that you don't do everything.
I was going to thank you, because I think that it sounds like you really thought through really important parts of managing to do with mental health. And there's a couple of things actually that I just wanted to reflect on back that I've heard, which I'm sure you've heard similar things. So when I had my brain injury, I had a neurooccupational therapist to help me with returning to work, which didn't really happen for many reasons. But one of the things she said to me was that for people like me, so overachieving perfectionists, you have to learn that achieving one thing in a day is you being perfect. Doing more than one thing in a day, you've failed. And that's what she taught me, was you have to learn to try not to achieve. She looked at me, she was like, you think that achieving 5 things is like a low number. She's like, only when you get to doing 1 and maybe nothing in a day have you actually worked this out. And I gave that to my mum, who's caring for my stepdad, and she's found that really helpful too, because taking the pressure off of it being today. So like you say, just skipping the day and being like, sod it, that day doesn't exist. Like, I'm not going to do all those things just because it's another day. Like, it takes the pressure off.
And resting is an activity, especially if you're recovering from an injury. But also if you're a caretaker of someone who's ill, there's just so much going on these days. Economy.
It's just normal life. We all need rest.
Exactly. It's on whatever scale, there's a lot to be stressed out about. And so resting, and you need to take a break and to unplug from that for a while. And yeah, if you feel like you're drowning and overwhelmed, pick one thing. What's your one thing? Today, I have 2 things. I'm chatting with you, and I actually have my book club tonight, which is also on Zoom. And so 2 whole things, that's a lot. And anything else I do is just a bonus.
And that's perfect. And I think it's so important to share that message for people who are perfectionists, who also tend to be overachievers. If you're a perfectionist, there's a tendency the two work quite well together as a pair. That inner critic likes to have both. And so that overachiever with your app also reminded me with the delegation piece about responsibility. And when we tend to overachieve and be perfectionists, right, we tend to take on more than what is ours. We tend to try and do things for other people. We see that, they're probably not going to get that done because of the following reasons. And so we try and do it ourselves. And I don't know, but I spend a lot of time telling my clients to delegate things to the universe. And so one of my favorite stories is that I'd sold my house in the UK, and there was this tax exemption that I was trying to get for the capital gains tax. And it was valid and I was allowed to do it, but I couldn't work out how to do it on my tax return. And I can't work it out. My perfectionist wanted to work it out, couldn't do it. And so I said, sod it, I'm delegating it to the universe, I'm done. And so I tapped delegate to universe. I had no idea what was going to happen, how it was going to work out, but somehow the universe was going to sort out my tax return. Now, you don't normally say you have to delegate your tax returns. Normally, most of us, it's like you have to do your tax return. But for me, like, that was the lesson. And 2 weeks later, a client got in touch with me, and he just so happened he was an accountant and for very wealthy people, and he offered to do it for me and look into it for free and solved my problem, and that was it. The universe did exactly that. I delegated it. It brought me someone when I just let it go. And so that delegating things, just giving it up and saying, I don't need to do it all. Sometimes it really works. That's not being responsible for my own part, right? Like feeding myself. But there's that understanding, I'm responsible for this and I don't need to be responsible for that, and I'm going to delegate. And so I really love your app for having that component and remembering that we're part of a collective co-creative web, and that in that delegating outwards, even if you don't know who to, like, it can be taken care of when we really know that actually it's not my responsibility and I'm going to give it up.
Exactly. And there's just so many people out there who you could ask for help or hire. Accountants exist. There are, people who are trying to write blog posts and tons of content for their own business, and writing isn't their strong suit. Well, there's a whole lot of copywriters who are looking for work. And, you can delegate to AI for ideas and what have you, but don't, at this point, if you delegate to AI to write, it's not going to connect with people. So you need people, and they're all out there. You can just ask for help. It's so many people think I have to do everything. I've got 2 teenage kids in the house and I have to do it all. But why aren't they doing stuff? Teenagers can do dishes. Teenagers can do some things. Yes, they're a complete disaster. They're totally messy, but you taught them to clean up when they were little. They can do some of that now.
Yeah. And so what you just said also brought me to my last piece that I wanted to ask you about, which was the voices, because you'd mentioned about speaking up and that being a really important part. And for me, it really sits with the energy of the perfectionist, and that kind of overwhelm of not feeling stable in things not being quite perfect. And so when things don't feel stable because they're not perfect, we suppress our voice because we don't feel like it's, for whatever reason, it's not going to be heard, it's not going to be taken well, it's going to be rejected, we're going to be, often very heavily criticized, or, negative things are going to be said that are going to be very upsetting and fracturing to our sense of self. And so I just appreciate, we touched on the difference between the inner coach and the inner critic as two different voices, but what are the other voices that you found want to come out?
The mouthy, pushy version of me. And I can be that person for other people. And being that person for myself, it used to come naturally. And then, of course, I stopped. You quiet yourself, because it's having that perfectionist in your brain. It's like being in an abusive relationship. That, if people who are in an abusive relationship try to not set off their abuser. They try to make themselves small and invisible and do everything perfectly. And that is a sucker's bet, because they're going to blow up at you. Your perfectionism is going to criticize you. There's just no way to win. And that's on your abuser. That's on your perfectionism. They are being unrealistic. And, I used to work in technology, and in the 90s and the beginning of the century, and being a woman in technology was as bad as you might think at that time. And so standing up for myself just made me come across as irrational. So that pushy, authoritative, I actually know what I'm talking about, Jen, hushed up. And so for her to be able to stand up and speak out for herself, that helps, just for me to be able to say, yeah, no, I'm a pretty good writer. I do good copywriting. I'm good at that. And I'm not good at writing code. I don't program. But I used to do functional design of software, and I designed this. And it's pretty good. It does what it needs to. And I did the parts that I can do, and I hired someone to do the parts I can't.
Reflect back from what you were sharing that felt an important piece is the self-advocacy of advocating what your gifts are, advocating what there is to be valued in yourself and to be celebrated, and what there is that needs to be said that is something you're contributing and giving to the world. And if you don't use your voice and advocate for that, we all lose out, because we lose out on you actually really sharing your gifts and your strengths. And so I'm really grateful for you for finding that voice and reasserting it. And yes, I think there's a whole separate conversation which is around, women's voices and that aspect for women, around where we are expected to be perfect in a man's world, like you said, with technology, like I had with law. There's definitely that whole conversation that affects us. But I think if we can just come to really at the core, what's really important is that inner critic stops you from sharing your gifts. And people need you to share them and to speak your voice and to advocate for yourself. And really that's one of the key things is to use our voices for what we're here to express. And for you, I'm loving the sharing of the professional imperfection. Can't even say it, that's great. And how it supports mental health. To me, that's such a key piece here, is the letting go of the ways in which our mental health is impacted. And so I'm really grateful for you sharing this. And is there anything else that you'd like listeners to learn, how they can connect with you, what more they can discover around your...
Oh, well, they can go to the website accompliced.app. It's the word accomplish with a T instead of an H. So autocorrect is going to try to bite you there. If you're interested in my writing, then JenAndersonWriter.com has, that's all my stuff there, and links to things like that. I do want to just and I'm on the socials, of course. And there's links to that all on the website on accomplice.app. But also one thing with I want to just make a point that I make with my writing about clothing, and it's metaphorical. It translates. It's that not every style is for you. It isn't that your body needs to change to suit the clothes. You need to find clothes that will suit your body. And it's standing up for yourself. It's advocating. It's finding a place in the world where you're needed and wanted and appreciated.
Thank you, Jen. Yeah, so true. And, sometimes it takes a few wrong places to find the right place. And so not to take the place that doesn't receive that as being just a general no, but just knowing that you're finding your way. And we often are not in the right community that is ready for us, right? And that's part of the journey, as well as finding our people as much as finding our voice. And so the two go hand in hand. And so I'm really grateful you brought that up. Thank you, Jen. It's so important to remind people there's many steps, there's many parts of the journey. And I'm a true believer that when you speak from your heart, with empathy, with awareness and compassion of the people that are listening, because obviously what they're able to hear is always going to affect what's received. And so when we can do that, at least from that place, you're always starting in the right direction of finding your voice, finding your expression, and finding the people that can hear it. And so I'm really grateful, Jen, for your time. Thank you for staying with me through the unstable internet, especially because most of it was my end. It's been a real pleasure to meet you. Best of luck with weaving your amazing chair. I hope that we get to see a picture of it one day. And and listeners, do connect and get the app.
Yeah, you know what? I think I'll put it on Instagram. The picture of how it's now, not quite there, and then later on.
Love it. I love it. I'm always telling my clients, share the journey, share the journey you're on. I had no intention of sharing my journey, but that was the way it naturally happened. And so there's power in our journey and people seeing our growth and seeing the mistakes that we make. And so, yeah, I'd love to see the journey with the chair as well. Thank you so much, Jen. And much love to you. Have a wonderful evening with your book club. And take care. All right. Thank you so much.
If you really enjoyed this episode with Jen, check out whether or not this is where you are in the awakening spiral by taking the quiz that we have in the description below. And you'll receive a free practice and library that can support you to move through and transform this stuckness into speaking and expressing yourself with joy. Thank you for joining. Have a wonderful day.